You open the refrigerator and notice something is wrong. The meat looks normal, but the smell is slightly off. You hesitate. Maybe it is still safe. Yet before you can reason it through, your body has already decided. Your appetite disappears. The smell pushes you back. The idea of swallowing it suddenly feels revolting. Now go back millions of years. There is no refrigerator, no expiration date, no laboratory test. There is only a carcass. For an early human, that carcass could represent energy, but it could carry disease. Archaeology shows that ancient hominins processed animal carcasses with stone tools. So the mystery is not why humans learned to eat meat. It is why a food valuable enough to pursue came with an instinct to reject it when decay appeared. To understand that dilemma, we first need to understand what meat meant to a human. Early humans did not suddenly become dedicated predators. The shift toward eating more animal foods appears gradual, varied, and shaped by local environments. At Kanjera South in Kenya, roughly 2 million years ago, researchers found evidence that Olduvai hominins acquired and processed relatively complete small antelope carcasses, while also accessing parts of larger animals. Stone tools gave them a way to cut meat and reach resources that would otherwise be difficult to obtain. Why take that risk? Because animal foods offered concentrated energy, protein, fat, and important micronutrients. For a human living without agriculture, refrigeration, or reliable plant foods, a carcass could be an unusually valuable resource. But valuable does not mean harmless. The crucial distinction is that meat was worth eating never meant every piece was worth eating. Survival depended on recognizing the difference. And that becomes complicated once we ask what happens to an animal after it dies. When an animal died, it did not simply become fresh meat, then rotten meat. It became a changing resource. Scavengers arrived at different stages, soft tissues disappeared, and some parts became harder to reach. Yet even after much of the flesh was gone, the bones could still hold valuable marrow, rich in fat. Early humans did not necessarily have to consume a carcass after prolonged decomposition. They could arrive while useful tissues remained, remove what they could, crack bones, and carry valuable portions away. At Olduvai, researchers have studied the order in which carnivores and hominins modified bones to understand which resources ancient humans were targeting. That changes the picture completely. Our ancestors were not simply choosing between fresh steak and rotten meat. They were navigating a carcass as it changed over time, extracting what was useful while competing with other animals. But if they could choose the best parts, what stopped them from making a deadly mistake? A carcass carried a problem ancient humans could not see. They could see flesh. They could smell decay. They could feel a strange texture. But they could not see the bacteria, parasites, or toxins that might be hiding inside it. For humans, that was a serious disadvantage. Some animals that specialize in eating carrion have remarkable defenses against the microbes found in dead animals, including powerful immune systems and extremely acidic stomachs. Humans never evolved into anything like a vulture. We could exploit animal carcasses, but we remained vulnerable to what they carried. And as animal foods became increasingly important, that created an evolutionary dilemma. The reward was high, but so was the cost. A 2023 review has proposed that greater carnivory may have increased pathogen pressure during human evolution, although that remains an interpretation rather than something we can directly observe in ancient humans. So, how could our ancestors avoid a danger they could not see? The answer may lie in one of the familiar and powerful emotions: disgust. Disgust is more than a reaction to something unpleasant. Researchers have proposed that it functions as a behavioral defense system, helping animals avoid things that might carry disease. Think about spoiled food. You do not need to identify the bacterium inside it. Your brain only needs to recognize clues that, over evolutionary time, often accompanied danger: an unusual smell, strange appearance, slimy texture, or visible decomposition. Those signals trigger a fast response. Appetite drops. You pull away. Sometimes nausea follows. The body is effectively saying, keep that outside. But there is an important limit to this explanation. Scientists cannot look into an ancient human's mind and prove that disgust evolved specifically because our ancestors ate rotten meat. The stronger evidence is human disgust responds to disease-relevant cues, including spoiled food and bodily substances, and shaped by biology and experience. So perhaps disgust is an ancient warning system, not a perfect detector of contamination. And that creates the next problem. If disgust protects us, why do humans sometimes eat food that sometimes looks questionable? Evolution rarely creates a perfect alarm system. An alarm system does not have to be perfect to save lives. It only has to prevent enough costly mistakes. That creates a trade-off. Reject perfectly safe food, and you lose a valuable meal. Eat contaminated food, and you could become seriously sick. In evolutionary terms, the second mistake could be far more expensive. So disgust may favor caution when the evidence is uncertain. A strange smell or suspicious texture might trigger rejection even when the food happens to be harmless. And the response can change with experience, culture, hunger, and context. For an ancient human facing an uncertain carcass, refusing suspicious meat was not automatically a death sentence. Sometimes it may have been the safer decision, but the opposite was also true. During severe food shortages, rejecting too much could mean giving up calories that were desperately needed. So what happened to the humans who refused the dangerous carcass? There may be no dramatic answer. Instead, survival likely depended on a toolkit of different behaviors. Ancient humans had another advantage. They did not have to treat an entire carcass as one meal. They could choose fresher animals, target useful tissues, and use stone tools to reach meat or marrow that other scavengers had missed. That mattered because survival was not simply about eating more. It was about getting the greatest nutritional reward without taking unnecessary risks. Later, cooking changed the equation again. Heat makes many foods easier to digest and can reduce some foodborne pathogens. Exactly when habitual cooking became widespread remains debated, but it clearly became an important tool in the human dietary story. This means our ancestors did not need to become perfect carrion eaters. They could remain flexible omnivores, adjusting their choices to what was available and what seemed safe. And that flexibility may explain something surprisingly familiar about us today. Because the ancient decision around a carcass still happens whenever you smell food and instinctively think, "Don't eat that." Back at the refrigerator, the meat looks slightly discolored. The smell is unfamiliar. Before you check the label or search for an answer, your body reacts. You hesitate. Maybe you should not eat it. That reaction does not prove every modern disgust response is an ancient adaptation. Culture, learning, personal experience, and modern food safety all shape what we consider acceptable. But the broader pathogen avoidance system gives that reaction an evolutionary context. Humans are constantly evaluating what should enter the body, using senses and experience to decide what feels safe and what feels dangerous. The supermarket is modern. The problem is ancient. And somewhere behind that instinctive rejection lies the carcass our ancestors once had to judge. We may never know what happened to ancient humans who refused a carcass. Archaeology cannot identify the individual who sensed something wrong and walked away. But that uncertainty points to a more interesting answer. Humans did not survive by becoming creatures that could eat anything. We survived through flexibility, taking foods while avoiding risks our senses could reveal. Today, you smell spoiled meat and push it away. That decision may echo a survival problem. Not, "Can I eat this?" but, "Is the reward worth the risk?" The supermarket is modern. The dilemma is ancient. Finding nourishment where things can remain invisible.